My name is Rosalie Bennett. I'm 31, and the moment my relationship ended didn't sound like heartbreak. It sounded like something settling into place, like a detail I had been ignoring, finally lining up too clearly to pretend it wasn't there. I work as an office administrator for a mid-sized insurance company in Denver. My days are structured. Schedules, reports, small problems that need to be handled before they grow into bigger ones. I like systems. I like things that behave the way they're supposed to. People are less predictable. Miles Carter is 28, freelance photographer. Weddings, brand shoots, lifestyle campaigns, whatever keeps his calendar full and his phone buzzing. His life moves fast. Late nights, weekend events, constant motion. When we met, that difference felt balanced. He brought energy. I brought stability. At least, that's what I believed. We had been together a little over 2 years. He didn't officially live with me, but his presence was everywhere. A jacket over the chair, camera gear by the wall, chargers I didn't recognize plugged into outlets I never used. At some point, my apartment stopped feeling entirely like mine. Back then, I didn't question it. Miles used to say my place felt like a reset. After long shoots, he would walk in, drop his bag, and exhale like the world finally slowed down for him. I thought that meant something. But somewhere during the second year, the way he talked about my life started to change. At first, it sounded like teasing. "You plan your weekends like meetings," he said once, smiling. Another time, he told me dating me felt like stepping into a routine instead of a story. He always said it lightly, but not lightly enough. And then, Lena Brooks started coming up. At first, just a name, another creative from a project, someone who knew people, someone who organized things. Normal. Except her name did not stay occasional. It became constant. Every story had her in it somehow. Every late night, every spontaneous plan, every "you wouldn't believe what happened." Lena was there. I noticed. I just didn't react until one Tuesday night. We were sitting at my kitchen table. I had just finished making pasta. He came over straight from a shoot, still wired with that restless energy he carried after long days. He mentioned her again. And this time, the way he said her name felt different. There was something behind it. I didn't interrupt, I just listened. He talked about how unpredictable things had been lately, how exciting, how different. Then he looked at me and said it, casually, calmly, like he had already rehearsed it. "Lena makes me feel alive." The room didn't change, but something inside me did. He didn't stop there. "With you, I feel secure." He said it like those two things were opposites, alive or secure. And somehow, I already knew which one he thought mattered more. I remember looking at him and realizing this wasn't a confession. It was a comparison. I asked him what he was trying to tell me. He didn't hesitate. He said maybe he wasn't done exploring life yet, that maybe he had settled into something comfortable with me, when he should still be figuring things out, exploring life. That was the phrase, like what we had built was just a phase he outgrew. I let him finish. He talked about excitement, about unpredictability, about how Lena reminded him what it felt like to not plan everything. The whole time, he spoke like this was growth, like honesty made it acceptable. When he stopped, the apartment went quiet. He looked at me like he was waiting for emotion, for resistance, for something. I just nodded once, and then I said it. "If that's what you need, go chase it." He blinked, like he hadn't expected the door to open that easily. I repeated it, calmly. "If she makes you feel alive, you should see where that goes." For a second, he tried to adjust. Said he wasn't necessarily leaving, just needed space. That part irritated me more than anything else. It sounded like he wanted to keep me here, just in case. So I made it clear, that's not how this works. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. If you walk out that door to figure things out with someone else, this ends. No pause. No waiting. No return. He frowned. Said I was being extreme. I told him it was simple. He had just explained that another woman made him feel something I didn't. That's not something you negotiate around. There was a long silence. Then I stood up, walked to the door, opened it. "You should probably take your things." He stared at me like he was still trying to decide if I meant it. I didn't move. After a few seconds, he picked up his camera bag. When he reached the doorway, he hesitated. "Are you really ending this over one conversation?" I looked at him, and for the first time that night, I felt completely certain. I'm not the one ending it. He stepped into the hallway, and just like that, he was gone. The door closed, and the quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was clear. The first week after Miles left didn't feel like heartbreak. It felt like silence settling into places that used to be occupied. Not loud, not painful, just noticeable. When you spend 2 years with someone, they don't just exist in big moments. They exist in details. a second toothbrush, a hoodie draped over a chair, the habit of expecting a message at a certain time of night. All of that disappeared overnight. But my life, it stayed exactly the same. I still woke up at the same time, still made coffee the same way, still went into the office and handled scheduling conflicts, payroll questions, the quiet rhythm of problems that could be solved if you stayed focused long enough. Routine has a way of holding things together, and I let it. A few people asked where Miles was. He used to show up to dinners sometimes, laugh louder than everyone else, made himself easy to remember. I kept the explanation simple. We wanted different things. No details, no drama, just the truth without the story. Meanwhile, he didn't stay quiet. About 2 weeks after everything ended, I saw a photo. Not because I was looking, because the algorithm decided I should. A mutual friend liked it. It showed up on my feed without permission. Miles and Lena. Rooftop bar, city lights behind them. Her arm looped around his neck like it had always belonged there. His expression, different, looser, unstructured. Like he had stepped fully into the version of himself he thought he wanted to be. The caption said something about living in the moment. I looked at it for maybe 5 seconds, long enough to register the details. Then I closed the app. That was the last time I checked anything connected to him. Not because I didn't care, because I already understood. Over the next few months, information still reached me. Not intentionally, just the way things travel when lives overlap. From what I gathered, they went all in. Late nights, events, last-minute trips, surrounded by people who moved fast and talked louder than necessary, the kind of energy that feels intoxicating when you're inside it. Exactly what he said he wanted, exactly what he chose. And for a while, it worked. Of course it did. When two people are chasing the same adrenaline, everything feels amplified in the beginning. Every moment feels like proof you made the right decision. But intensity has a pattern. It builds fast, and it burns just as quickly. 3 months passed like that. Quiet for me. Loud somewhere else. Until one Saturday evening, my phone buzzed. I was at home, halfway through answering emails I had ignored earlier in the week. The kind of small, unfinished tasks that pile up if you don't stay ahead of them. The screen lit up with a number I hadn't seen in 3 months. Still familiar. Still saved. I stared at it for a second. Then the message appeared. Hey, that was it. No explanation. No context. Just one word, like nothing had happened between us. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. That would have been the cleanest choice. But curiosity is a quiet thing. It doesn't push, it just lingers. So I replied, "What's going on?" The response came almost immediately. "Can we talk?" That alone told me everything had changed. Miles was not someone who asked carefully for conversations. He used to say whatever came to mind whenever it came to mind. Now, there was hesitation. I asked what he wanted to talk about. There was a pause. A few minutes. Then the next message came through. Things with Lena didn't work out. No explanation. Just that sentence. I leaned back in my chair. And for a brief second, I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. When something is built entirely on excitement, it rarely has anything underneath to hold it in place. Still, I kept my response neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that." There was a delay this time. Longer. Then another message. He said the last few months had been intense, confusing, that maybe he got caught up in something new. He used careful language that avoided responsibility. And then he said the part that mattered. I've been thinking a lot about what actually matters. I didn't respond. I just read, stability. That word showed up again. Not directly, but in everything he described. How calm things used to feel. How grounded. How different it was compared to what he had just experienced. It wasn't hard to translate. The excitement was gone. And suddenly, stability looked valuable again. Then came the question, "Do you think we could meet and talk?" There it was. Not an apology. Not accountability. Just a suggestion that maybe we ended things too quickly. That maybe something was still there. I read the message twice. Not because it was complicated. Because it confirmed exactly what I already knew. 3 months ago, he had made a decision. He chose what made him feel alive. Now that it was gone, he was reaching back toward what felt safe. I typed slowly. Not out of hesitation, out of precision. "I hope you figure out what you're looking for." I paused, then added one more line. "All I ever offered you was stability. You made it clear that wasn't enough." I sent it and waited. The typing bubble appeared almost immediately. Of course it did. He wasn't expecting that answer either. But I didn't open the next message. Instead, I opened his contact, looked at it for a second, then blocked the number. No speech, no explanation, just a quiet decision. Because the conversation, was already finished. For about 2 weeks, that was the end of it. Everything went back to normal. Work, routine, silence that didn't feel heavy anymore. Until one evening, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. My friends usually text first. My neighbors don't knock. So the sound itself felt out of place. I walked to the door, opened it, and there he was, Miles, standing in the hallway like time hadn't fully caught up to him yet. But it had. I could see it in the details. The tiredness, the edges of something that had worn down faster than expected. He gave a small, almost awkward smile. I think you blocked me. I nodded. I did. He let out a short laugh, like I had made a joke, like this was still a conversation he could steer. I figured it'd be easier to just come by. That sentence told me everything I needed to know. He still thought access was something he could choose, like boundaries were temporary, like distance was negotiable. He started talking before I even responded, explaining, framing, rewriting, and I just stood there, listening, because I already knew how this was going to end. He stood in the hallway with one hand half in his jacket pocket, like he was trying to look casual in a moment that had already stopped being casual the second I opened the door. Up close, he looked different from the man who walked out 3 months earlier. Not dramatically, just diminished. The kind of tiredness that doesn't come from one bad night, but from weeks of pretending something is still exciting after it has already started falling apart. His hair was longer than usual, slightly uneven at the edges, like he had missed one too many appointments. There were faint shadows under his eyes. His smile kept appearing and disappearing, never fully settling into anything real. For one brief second, I remembered what it used to feel like to open this door and be happy to see him. Then the feeling passed. He started explaining before I invited him to, which I didn't. According to him, things with Lena had gotten complicated. That was the word he used first. Complicated, as if what happened between them had become too layered for simple language. He said she was fun at the beginning, spontaneous, magnetic, always chasing the next idea, the next event, the next place to be. He said it the way people talk about weather that was pleasant until it turned on them. Then came the shift. Eventually, she became impossible to pin down, hard to rely on, too inconsistent, too chaotic. He said she changed plans at the last minute, disappeared for hours, made promises she didn't keep. One week she acted all in, the next she was distant. I listened without moving. The entire time he spoke, I noticed the pattern. He was describing her with the same traits he once admired. Spontaneous had become unstable. Exciting had become unreliable. Unpredictable had stopped sounding romantic once it started affecting him. He looked past me into the apartment while he talked, like the familiar furniture and quiet lighting were part of the point he was trying to make. Like this place itself could support his argument. Then he said it. I think I understand now what actually matters. His eyes came back to mine when he said it, and there was something almost hopeful in the way he held my gaze. That hope irritated me more than anger would have, because hope meant he still believed this conversation could end in his favor. I didn't answer, so he kept going. He said the last few months had taught him something. That excitement isn't enough. That eventually you need consistency, calm, someone you can trust. He was very careful with his wording. Not once did he say, I hurt you. Not once did he say, I was wrong. He talked about lessons, about perspective, about what he had learned, as if the pain of the situation had been educational for him and merely inconvenient for me. Then he took a breath and finally said what he came to say. Maybe we could start over. The sentence hung there between us. Simple, absurd. He said it like we were discussing a trip that had gone badly, like he had wandered off for a season, gotten lost, and now wanted directions back to where he had left his life waiting. I looked at him for a moment and felt something colder than resentment. Clarity. Because the problem was suddenly so obvious. He wasn't standing here because he had chosen me. He was standing here because in his mind I had remained available. That was the part that mattered. Not Lena, not the breakup, not the lesson. The assumption beneath all of it. That stability stays put. That it waits. That it keeps the light on. I folded my arms lightly, more to hold still than anything else. The issue was never Lena. He frowned slightly, like that wasn't the direction he expected. It wasn't? He asked. No. My voice stayed even. The issue was the decision you made before her. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. So I continued. You sat at my kitchen table and told me another woman made you feel alive while I made you feel secure. You didn't say it in confusion. You said it because you believed it. His expression tightened. I was being honest. That doesn't make it harmless. A beat of silence passed. He shifted his weight. I didn't mean it the way it came out. I almost laughed at that. Not because it was funny. because it was convenient. You meant it exactly the way you said it, I replied. You just don't like where it led. That landed. I saw it in his face. For the first time since arriving, some of the practiced calm dropped away. He looked frustrated now. Not devastated, not remorseful. Frustrated, like the conversation was slipping out of his control. People make mistakes, Rosalie. There it was. The reframing. He wanted this to be a mistake. Something accidental, emotional, temporary, something softer than what it really was. I shook my head. No, this wasn't a mistake. He stared at me. It was a decision. The hallway went very still after that. Even the building seemed quieter. He looked at me like he was waiting for me to soften the line, to qualify it, to make room for nuance. I didn't. 3 months earlier, he had stood in my apartment and told me he wanted to explore what life felt like with someone else. Then he explored it. Fully, freely, without hesitation. That isn't a mistake. That's a choice with the timeline. He ran a hand over the back of his neck. I just think maybe everything got bigger than it needed to. No, I said again. I think you expected me to still be here when it was over. His face changed then. Subtly. But enough. I had finally named the part he wanted left unspoken. That's not fair. It's exactly fair. He looked away for a second, down the hallway, then back at me. I came here because I realized what I had. No, I said, and this time my voice turned sharper, not louder, just cleaner. You came here because what you picked didn't last. He went quiet. And in that quiet, I could almost feel the truth settling onto him with the same heaviness it had settled onto me months earlier. He wasn't arguing because he had no response. He was arguing because he wanted the story to sound better than it was. He tried one more angle. What if I just needed to lose something to understand it? That line might have worked on someone still waiting to be chosen. It did nothing to me. I looked at him and saw the shape of the whole thing at once. He had treated me like structure, like support, like something solid enough to leave and stable enough to return to. Not because he valued me most, because he assumed I would still exist in the same form when he was ready. That was the insult buried under everything else, not the comparison, not even the leaving, the assumption of return. I let the silence stretch long enough for him to feel it. Then I said very calmly, "This place was never meant to be a backup." His jaw tightened. "I'm not saying you're a backup. You don't have to say it." Another pause. This one heavier, more final. He looked past me again, into the apartment he used to walk into without knocking, like maybe familiarity itself could help him. Like memory could do work that accountability hadn't. It couldn't. He exhaled slowly. "So that's it?" I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, this had been it for a long time. He just hadn't accepted that yet. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet. "That was it the night you left." He stared at me. And for the first time, I think he understood that I wasn't having this conversation to decide. I had already decided. I was only saying it out loud because he had shown up at my door and asked me to repeat what should have been obvious. The expression on his face shifted again, this time away from frustration, towards something closer to disbelief, like he had walked all the way back here expecting resistance, and instead found a locked door that had never actually reopened. He stood there a second longer, like he was waiting for something to change, for my expression to soften, for my tone to shift, for the version of me he remembered to step back in and make this easier for him. It didn't happen. The hallway light hummed quietly above us. Somewhere down the corridor, a door closed, followed by the faint echo of footsteps moving away. Life continuing, unaffected. He swallowed, then tried one last time. "Are you really going to throw everything away over this?" The question landed exactly the way I expected it to. Carefully worded. Redirected, as if I was the one making the final decision that ended us. I held his gaze. "I'm not the one who threw anything away." A small silence followed. Then he shook his head slightly, like he couldn't accept that version of the story. It was one mistake. There it was again. He needed it to be small, contained, manageable. Something that could be forgiven without changing the outcome. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step closer. I just said it plainly. It wasn't one mistake, it was a choice. His jaw tightened. "You're acting like I planned it." "You didn't have to plan it," I replied. "You just had to decide it was worth risking us." That was the part he didn't want to sit with. Because once it became a decision, it became intentional. And intentional things don't disappear just because the outcome is disappointing. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "I came back, didn't I?" The words came out with a trace of frustration now, like returning should count for something on its own, like effort after the fact could balance what came before. I looked at him for the long second. Then I said very quietly, You came back because it didn't work. The truth didn't sound cruel. It sounded simple. And that made it harder for him to argue with. His shoulders dropped slightly, just enough to show something underneath the defensiveness. Not regret. Not fully, but the beginning of understanding. He looked past me one last time into the apartment. The same space he used to walk into without thinking. The same kitchen table where he told me someone else made him feel alive. The same place he assumed would still be waiting. Then his eyes came back to mine. What if things are different now? That question wasn't about change. It was about permission. I shook my head. I believe things are different for you. He frowned slightly. But they're different for me, too. That was the part he hadn't accounted for. That time didn't just pass for him. It passed for me, too. And in that time, something had settled into place. Not anger. Not bitterness. Just clarity. I took a small step back, enough to create distance between us. Not aggressive. Just intentional. This place, I said slowly, isn't safe for you anymore. He blinked, not understanding at first. So I explained. And not because I hate you. Not because I'm trying to punish you. I paused. But because you already proved you don't want what exists here. The words landed differently. Not sharp. Not emotional. Just final. He stared at me for a few seconds, like he was searching for something to hold on to. Some opening. Some version of this conversation where it didn't end here. There wasn't one. Eventually, his shoulders sank just a little more. The resistance faded. Not completely, but enough. He nodded once. Slow. Almost absent. Like he was acknowledging something he didn't like but couldn't change. Okay, he said quietly. No argument. No dramatic last attempt. Just that one word. I held the door open for a second longer. Not out of hesitation. Out of respect for what it had been. Then I stepped back inside. Good night, Miles. And I closed the door. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried. I stood there for a moment listening. No knock. No voice calling my name. Just the faint echo of his footsteps moving down the hallway, growing quieter, until they disappeared completely. Then everything was still again. I walked back into the kitchen, sat down at the same table where it had all started. 3 months earlier, he had sat across from me and told me another woman made him feel alive, while I made him feel secure. Back then, he said it like security was something people settled for, something safe, something secondary. So I opened the door and let him go find what he thought mattered more. And he did. For 3 months, he lived exactly the life he described. Late nights, spontaneous plans, that constant rush of something new, until the person who created that feeling moved on. And suddenly, everything he once dismissed started to look different. Calmer, more valuable, safer. But that's the part people misunderstand. Stability only works when it's chosen the first time. It doesn't wait to be rediscovered. It doesn't stay untouched while someone tests something else. And it doesn't welcome you back, like nothing happened. He didn't understand that when he knocked on my door. He thought realization would be enough. That learning something would rewind everything. But relationships don't reset like that. When someone looks at you and tells you directly that another person makes them feel more alive, you believe them. The first time. So I did. I believed him. I opened the door, and I let him go. 3 months later, he came back expecting the same door to still be open. It wasn't. And standing there in my kitchen, in the quiet that followed, I realized something that felt even clearer than before. If someone leaves you to chase something better, you were never their choice. You were their option. And I have never been interested in being someone's option.